Many of us chase a sense of lasting happiness and notice the same pattern. A change arrives, a brief lift follows, and then the feeling slides back toward normal. That pattern can make improvement feel futile. Why does joy not stick the way we imagine? Welcome to Mini Mind Hack. In this video, we'll first separate two different ways we think about happiness, then look inside the brain to see the mechanisms that make happiness slippery, examine individual and cultural factors that shape it, and finish with practical steps that help make well-being more durable. When people talk about happiness, they often mean different things. Daniel Kahneman, an Israeli-American psychologist best known for his work on judgment and decision-making, introduced a useful distinction. He calls one side the experiencing self, the person who feels pleasure, pain, and presence in the moment. The other is the remembering self, the narrator who files events away and judges the whole on memory, highlights, and endings. A weekend that is joyful in the moment can be judged differently by the remembering self if it ends poorly. Understanding this split helps explain why pursuing peak moments doesn't always increase our long-term sense of satisfaction. If we look under the hood, the brain is essentially a prediction machine. It constantly makes guesses about what will happen next, and it adjusts those guesses based on error. Dopamine, a neurotransmitter often discussed in conversations about reward, plays a special role in signaling prediction error, the difference between expected and actual outcomes. Importantly, dopamine is more about anticipation and learning than about the quiet feeling of contentment after an achievement. When you expect a reward and receive slightly more, dopamine spikes and you learn that the action was valuable. Over repeated cycles, the system adapts. What used to feel novel and motivating becomes ordinary. That process, known as hedonic adaptation, explains why successive gains often produce smaller and shorter lifts in mood. Antonio Damasio, a Portuguese-American neuroscientist at the University of Southern California, emphasizes that feelings are not just mental decorations, but embodied signals. Emotions integrate signals from the body, heart rate, breathing, hormonal state, and shape decisions. Feeling calm after a walk is not just a thought. It is a change in bodily regulation. This embodied dimension matters because lasting well-being depends on circuits that regulate arousal and stress over time, not only on transient pleasures. But brains are not identical. Richard J. Davidson, an American neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, has shown that people have different affective styles. Some recover quickly from negative events, others remain activated longer. Crucially, these patterns are plastic. Practices such as focused attention, certain forms of psychotherapy, and sustained social engagement can alter brain networks associated with emotion regulation. That means change is possible, but it usually requires repetition and stable context that support the new pattern. Anil Seth, a British neuroscientist at the University of Sussex, frames perception, including the sense of self, as an active construction. The brain constantly generates models of the world and itself. These models are useful shortcuts rather than perfect replicas. When our models expect constant novelty and improvement, the experience of enough becomes harder to generate. In a culture saturated with prompts to optimize, the brain keeps updating its expectations upward, and the baseline of what feels satisfactory rises. Martin Seligman, the American psychologist often associated with positive psychology and work at the University of Pennsylvania, argued that flourishing includes more than pleasure. It involves engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. Interventions that only increase short-term positive emotion, say buying things or ticking productivity boxes, often miss the deeper sources of durable well-being. Activities that involve sustained engagement, contribution to others, and values-based work are those that more reliably build a stable sense of satisfaction over time. Putting this together, the slipperiness of happiness is not a moral failing. It is the outcome of a predictive brain adapting to repeated stimulation, embodied emotional systems that register arousal rather than calm, individual differences that shape recovery and response, and a cultural context that continually raises the bar for what counts as success. So what actually helps? First, distinguish immediate pleasure from sustainable satisfaction. Pleasure matters, but it is not the whole project. Second, Shift some of your intention from chasing peaks to strengthening regulatory habits, predictable sleep, regular movement, and short practices that reduce stress reactivity. These do not produce dramatic spikes, but they change the background level of calm over weeks and months. Third, cultivate activities that give you sustained engagement, things that absorb you without demanding constant measurement. Learning a craft, nurturing a relationship, or helping someone in a repeated and reliable way creates patterns the brain learns to value in the long run. Fourth, practice setting boundaries with novelty. Limit constant inputs that train the brain to expect continuous escalation. That might mean curating the news, scheduling offline times, and creating small rituals that mark beginnings and endings of work. On the memory side, pay attention to how experiences end. Kahneman's work shows that the way an experience finishes disproportionately shapes how it is remembered. If you want certain days to be remembered well, design a simple, positive ending. A brief gratitude note, a short walk, or a small conversation that gives closure. Finally, accept that well-being is partly relational and partly structural. Individual practices matter, and neuroscience shows we can change. But the environment we live in, the work rhythms, social expectations, and cultural valuation of constant improvement also shapes what counts as enough. Sustainable change therefore combines personal habit formation with social arrangements, predictable schedules, reasonable expectations, and community structures that support repeated engagement. Happiness does not arrive as a permanent state you unlock once and keep. It is a pattern that emerges when prediction systems, embodied regulation, meaningful activity, and social conditions align across time. Small, steady investments in how you organize your days, how you end your experiences, and how you protect your attention pay off more reliably than chasing the next big boost. If this perspective helped you reframe your experience, thank you for listening. If you'd like more essays that connect lived feeling to research and culture, consider subscribing and sharing what you found useful. Take care, and I'll see you next time.